Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have attendees from around the globe, so that's actually a true statement. It's noon in Seattle on a special edition of MSP Tech Talk Winter Quarter. It's Friday, and it's the Friday before the Super Bowl. So appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and joining us on what will be a security, a compliance, and a HIPAA topic with the man, Mike Semel. Couple of reminders, folks. So first of all, thanks to our sponsors, Fortinet, Synnex, and SureWeb. We fancy ourselves a much like public radio or public TV that we're bringing to you each quarter. We're bringing real academic and actionable content that's supported by the generous underwriting of these sponsors. A couple of reminders: you need to have your computer audio on to hear the videos. Use the question features to ask all your questions. Today, Jenny has volunteered to read the questions out of the radio control room, and then also check out the handout section over in your control panel for some additional slides. Next week, we'll be back to our regular time on Wednesday. You'll get ample notification of that. And you're also receiving some messaging for the SureWeb Accelerate Conference. You'll get more information on that in the follow-up email, but we're supporting SureWeb because they support us, and they have an interesting 5-lecture series in February on non-competing dates, thank goodness, that are of interest. With that said, Mike Semel, Mike, let's just move, if you don't mind, sir, let's just jump right into it. Please introduce yourself for folks that don't. Well, there you are. Who the heck is Mike Semel? Mike,
I'll get there.
First of all, let's start with the topic, and then who's Mike?
Thanks, Harry. And thank you, Jenny, for all of your help getting this set up. And thanks to Fortinet, Synnex, and SureWeb for sponsoring this event, and to everyone who's taken the time to join us today. We're going to talk about how to turn security and compliance into gold. And I've done this for a very long time. I've proven it. I've worked with many managed service providers and cloud services and other types of businesses in the IT world to help them turn security and compliance into gold. And we're going to give you information today that you're going to be able to use either later today or tomorrow or Monday very quickly to turn business around that you may have not thought about in the past, or maybe you're going to use some different techniques now to close sales even faster. So who the heck am I, and why are you listening to me? I'm sure that some of you may have heard me talk before at different events and on different webinars, but for those of you that don't know me, I've been in this business for about 35 years. That's about maybe half of what Harry's been in the business. But I've owned my own managed service provider business. I have worked for other organizations. 15 years ago, I went to a conference. It was an IT conference, and I heard about HIPAA. And I was absolutely stunned that the federal government was going to mandate IT security requirements for an entire industry. The healthcare industry is pretty unique in that it can be one person opening a little office on a corner all the way up to the biggest health systems that you can think of. And I saw that as a huge opportunity. I had a background in healthcare already. My hobby was being an emergency medical technician, and I worked in an emergency room part-time. I was the rescue captain in a fire department, and for 19 years I traveled on the IndyCar safety team with a bunch of doctors and nurses. So I was very much involved in healthcare as a hobby, and I was able to tie my hobby into my business, and it really paid off. I was offered the job as the chief information officer for a local hospital, and I kept turning them down because I didn't want to close my business, and finally we agreed that they would hire my managed services business and as their IT department, and I became their chief information officer. I was also the chief information officer for a K-12 school district, and I was the chief operating officer for one of the first cloud backup services that was able to recover data in the cloud, not just store the data in the cloud, but recover the entire client environment in the cloud. I'm a member of the FBI's InfraGuard program, and I'm very heavily involved in CompTIA, the IT Industry Association. I have chaired their security community, and I'll also talk about the CompTIA Security Trustmark in just a minute. I do a lot of speaking and writing. And I've spoken at many events, CompTIA events, ASCII events, many different events, spoke at an SMB Nation event in Las Vegas, and also have written a lot of articles for magazines and websites. In 2016, I was fortunate to be invited by NASA to come speak to the medical team at the Kennedy Space Center. Last year, I became a best-selling author of a book called How to Avoid HIPAA.
On that last slide, if you don't mind, you know me, I like to interrupt, but you sure are handsome, so please continue. Back
Thanks,
at you.
Gary.
We're going to have a little fun. Go ahead.
I really appreciate that. So that said, I became a best-selling author last year of a book called How to Avoid HIPAA Headaches, and it's a quick read, but what I did was I deconstructed HIPAA penalties, and I showed what could have been done to prevent them, and the idea is that this is a book of lessons learned from other people's misfortunes. These were actual events that took place, and what the penalties were, what the root causes were. So, for example, someone was penalized for not having data encrypted. This is all related to healthcare and HIPAA. So it was healthcare data that was not encrypted, and they ended up paying a $2 million fine. We deconstructed that based on what the findings were of the federal investigation and found out that their big problem was that during their initial risk assessment, they had not identified all the locations where they were storing data, and therefore it wasn't encrypted. So the message is, do a good risk assessment, identify the locations of all of your data, and make sure that you encrypt it so that you can avoid a penalty. At the end of this presentation today, I'm going to give you an opportunity to get a copy of my book for free, both a printed copy and an electronic version. Somebody asked if Harry would be able to understand the book. So we had it tested. And you can see that the book's been fully tested to be easy to understand. Then someone says, well, can you speed read it? So we had it tested for speed reading. So it's been fully tested, it's official, and it's easy to understand, and you can read it very quickly.
Love it.
Sir,
you can dish it out. You can dish it out as well as you take it. My compliments. Please continue.
Okay. So some of you know me through some of the webinars and the events that I've gone to for RapidFire Tools. And RapidFire Tools is one of our clients, and we help them develop the HIPAA module, the HIPAA assessment module, and we were already using their network and security modules and then writing reports to tie the findings to HIPAA. And then I was contacted by the president of the company who called and said, I want to tell you, I'm from RapidFire Tools, I want to tell you what we do. And I said, you don't have to. You're interrupting me from reading one of your reports. And we developed this HIPAA module, which takes the findings from a network security scan and doesn't just say, for example, passwords are set to never expire, and that's not a good idea. What it says is that passwords are set to never expire, and that's not in compliance with HIPAA section 164.308 or 312, whatever the section is, and makes it specific to HIPAA. It also includes policies and procedures and things. It's really a great tool because it doesn't just look at the network and the information on there. There's a questionnaire process that you go through to identify, for example, who in an organization should be able to see protected health information. So when you're looking at who's got access to the shares on the network, you can find out if there's a disconnect. You may find someone that they said shouldn't have access to protected health information that does. So it's a really strong tool, and I'm very proud to say that we helped them develop this. Also, I've done a lot of work with CompTIA, and one of the things that I helped develop was the CompTIA Security Trustmark. Now, many of you are probably familiar with CompTIA for their A+ and Security Plus and Network Plus certifications. Those are for people, and those certifications stay with the individual. The Security Trustmark is a business level accreditation that looks at an organization, for example, your business, to see if you've implemented security controls, and if you're adhering to those, it's audited, and it's based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. It's the U.S. government agency that provides guidance on cybersecurity. And the NIST cybersecurity framework is something that is a free framework that you can use to apply to any business, and it's 41 pages. Now, maybe that sounds like a lot to you, but the other NIST guidance for government agencies on how to secure data is 540 pages. So this is a great framework. That doesn't mean that it's watered down. There's a lot of things in there that MSPs could use to generate more business, but the Trustmark is based on this. I've earned it for 3 of my own companies, and I've coached over 30 other companies to earn the Trustmark. So before I get into
Mike, yeah, and just quickly, I'd say that's got legs. That designation has legs. But let's keep this party going. I'm seeing IT security trends. Let's rock.
Okay. So before I get right into HIPAA, I want to kind of step back and look at this at a higher level. And let's just look at some of the things that are going on right now. We're seeing more cybersecurity legislation than we've ever seen before, and it says is the next frontier of state regulation. For those of you that are even outside of the United States, I think you figured out by now that our Congress is not getting a lot done. There's a lot of partisanship, a lot of arguing, and I'm not going to get into any of the politics other than to say the states are looking at regulation because they don't feel that the federal government is doing its job to either provide regulations or to enforce the regulations that are on the books. So we're seeing more and more regulations. Last year, New York State put out a cybersecurity regulation for all organizations that are supervised by the New York State Department of Financial Services. Now, Harry lives in the state of Washington. What does that have to do with New York State? If there's a company in Washington that wants to sell any financial services into New York State, it has to be licensed. So this rule is affecting companies all across the country. And by creating this rule, which, by the way, is based on that same NIST cybersecurity framework that I talked about with the security Trustmark, that this rule now is a framework for states that oversee financial services to use in their states. What we saw many years ago was California put in a state data breach rule, and then 47 other states have adopted it. What we've seen already from New York State is that Colorado is already adopting it and putting it into effect this year. The message to you is that you may have financial services clients, even if you're outside of New York, that may have to comply with this. Now, the regulation is already kicked in. They should have already done things. But you may have opportunities here to sell your managed services to people that have to comply with these regulations. And again, they don't have to be located in New York. Not just legislation, but we're seeing tons of litigation related to cybersecurity incidents. And I think everyone's been affected personally, one way or another, by the Equifax data breach, that there were lawsuits that came from that. And these are class action suits from people whose information was stolen. So even if they're not proven, there are already costs being incurred related to this data breach. But what got interesting about this is that as soon as the lawsuits started coming, so the cause of the Equifax breach was that Equifax had not applied a security patch to its Linux servers. And Apache, which oversees the open source software, immediately put out a press release. This came out of USA Today. They went as public as they could, as fast as they could, because they're trying to cover themselves and protect themselves from their own lawsuits. And they were blaming Equifax, saying that Equifax was liable for everything because they failed to install the security updates in a timely manner. So Equifax allegedly had the updates and didn't apply them. The Equifax CEO was nice enough, he's the former CEO, he'd already resigned or got fired because of this. He went to Congress and blamed his IT guy, his own IT staffer who was responsible for patches, saying he didn't do the job. Now, I want you to stop on this slide for a minute and look at those fingers pointing. Who's the IT guy for your clients? And what if you don't apply a patch? What I'm showing you here is there's direct linkage between what you're doing and what an IT guy working for an IT department would be doing. And this is something where you have some liability. So what you need to do, first of all, is make sure you're delivering the services that you're promising, properly documenting those. But also, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to tell you, look at your terms and conditions and the contracts you're signing with your clients. And we never did anything, even a single repair for a client, without having them sign some sort of a contract agreeing to our terms and conditions, where your liability is limited. So if you're an MSP, you're not dealing with somebody the size of Equifax, but you're dealing with one of your clients. First of all, when patches and things come out, you have to be diligent about deploying them. But also you want to make sure that even if you do screw up, that your liability is limited in your contracts, and also you should have errors and omissions insurance, which really isn't that expensive, that will protect you from losing everything you've invested in your business. Besides litigation and legislation that we've talked about, the government is looking at a lot of these data breaches from a consumer protection standpoint. So this is a situation where the Federal Trade Commission from the United States government closed a medical lab that had a data breach. And this was an article in Forbes magazine that says the FTC's data security error treating small businesses like the Fortune 1000. But if you're an MSP and you're selling to small businesses, this type of headline is gold. Because you can go to a small business where the owner says, well, nobody cares about us, nobody's ever going to target us because we're so small, and go read this Forbes article because the Federal Trade Commission shut down a medical lab that had 20 employees because of a data breach. What you're trying to do is make it more real that something could happen to one of your clients. We're seeing more and more, and I know you're seeing more and more, industries that are dependent on technology. So these are some headlines about bar associations and law firms. Mandatory e-filing. So mandatory is obviously required, and e-filing has to do with the court documents that have to be filed. It used to be that people from law firms would take papers, literally walk papers into a court and have somebody rubber stamp them with the date and time that they were received, and it was all paper, handled by paper. Now, mandatory e-filing says that the same documents for lawsuits and different kinds of court cases have to be filed electronically. What happens if a law firm is hit with a ransomware attack and their systems are locked up and maybe you have a good backup process, so you're restoring their backups, but they may be missing deadlines? We were at a client site doing an assessment and saw some problems. They were backing up to tape. I was talking to their IT guy who thought that it would take them 2 days to recover using the tapes. And I said to the managing partner, think about your biggest client. What would be the effect on your firm if you missed a filing deadline for a court case for your biggest client? And he looked at me and he just said the word millions. The reason this becomes important is when you're out trying to sell managed services, don't tell them how great your backup and your recovery is and all the great tools you have. Find out what their risks are, in this case millions, and if you can shorten that process, it almost doesn't matter what you charge them because you aren't going to be charging them anywhere near the millions of dollars that they're going to be avoiding having to pay or lose if they don't take care of their best clients. So this is just a much more of a dependence on technology than we've ever seen before. When we look at all these different industries, we're kind of thinking abstract and different types of clients you may have and different types of industries, but let's bring it down to you as MSPs. This was an article that was in Channel Pro that says that cyber criminals are seeking the low-hanging fruit via MSPs. And it says at the direction of the Chinese government, so this is a state-sanctioned process, they are increasing reconnaissance of small business. They know the key to getting into many of their networks is through their MSPs. And then a gentleman from CompTIA said if you came to work and found that all of your customers had been breached through your firm, you would probably go out of business. And I've heard this. I've had MSPs in the room nodding their heads when they thought about this. So if you're using one of the online professional service automation tools, ConnectWise, Autotest, TigerClaw, doesn't matter which one, just imagine what the effect would be on your business. So one of the messages today is that you need to look at your own business and make sure you're secure at the same time as you're taking care of your clients. And one thing we've seen is that MSPs are often the cobbler's children with no shoes, where the client's networks are in great shape and there's great security on them, and when we scan the MSP's networks, we'll find things like patches not being up to date, firmware updates on devices not being up to date, and things like that, where the clients are well taken care of, but the MSP isn't. Don't forget that you have critical information that could hurt your clients if it's breached, and you want to protect your clients and yourself. So just a couple of basic definitions here that I use to make sure we're all on the same wavelength. And the first is that security is very simply the protection of data against loss, theft, and unauthorized access. I've heard all sorts of different definitions of security, that there are firewalls, there's antivirus software, there's patches and updates. They're all true. Those are all tools, but every single one of them comes back to this definition, including online backup, which is protection of data against loss, theft, and unauthorized access. How do you approach security? We learned a long time ago that security is a business problem with a technical solution. How do we know that? If somebody's writing a check for $3 million to settle a lawsuit or $2 million to pay a federal fine, and you ask them if they have a technical problem, they will tell you that writing a $2 million check is a business problem. And they'll tell you that losing their data and not being able to file a court document on time is a business problem. Where you come in is you're the solution. So whenever you talk about security, make sure you're always understanding what their business problem is. So when you present your technical solution, you're able to compare the value of their risk to the price that you're offering. Harry?
Yes, sir. Out of respect, I put myself on mute so I wouldn't get all crazy on you. So, folks, if you're just joining the webinar, we have Mike Semel talking about security compliance, HIPAA, and other insights. Great crowd today, Mike. Thank you. You know, our goal with the MSP Tech Talk Winter Quarter is academic content, but what makes the world go round, of course, is the generosity of our underwriters. And in this case, it's Fortinet. So I want to have a Fortinet moment or two. Longtime sponsors. So I'm going to give this a shot, and let me see where the handout pane is. Jenny, I'm looking. Jenny, can you come online? I know you gave me extra duty today, and I'm trying to find the Fortinet video.
Under Show My Screen, Harry, there's a drop down.
Okay, hang on. Got it. Thank you, Jenny. And on the drop down is setting under Show My Screen. Folks, thank you very much. Jenny's training me, and rightfully so. I can use it. So what I'll ask of you folks is to use your computer speaker for the Fortinet video, and the video is about the Pittsburgh Steelers, the football team, and we thought this was really cool because it is Super Bowl Sunday this week. Then Bob Nitrio, I'm going to have you quickly talk about how you work with Fortinet. So let's give this a shot. Jenny, are we back?
Perfect.
All right, Bob Nitrio. Hey, friend, if you don't mind, we got so much content today. Give me the net on being a Fortinet partner, sir. You're pretty excited about it.
Absolutely. Can you hear me now? We'll do the Verizon thing.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
And I believe we have a poll in progress, but Bob, you, sir, are so important, we're going to have you talk over the poll.
Better than talking over the back fence, right?
There you go.
Higher level. Anyway, I've been a Fortinet partner for probably about 15 years. When Small Business Server first hit the market, I became very much aware that we needed to partner with somebody for firewalls. And the company that I first chose wasn't a good fit for me. And I went out and investigated the market, and I found Fortinet. They were very impressive back then, and to me, they're still very impressive today. They keep expanding their services, but for the small business clients that I've worked with, The amazing thing that I can say is that we've never been hit with a malware attack whenever those networks have been behind a Fortinet firewall with unified threat management. We had only one instance of CryptoLocker take place, and that was something that at the time we had no real defense for, and that was not Fortinet's problem. But we added another product to prevent, well, it was application whitelisting to prevent things that are unexpected from running. If we don't know them, they don't run. But I can honestly say that Fortinet has been one of our very best partners in the technology field when it comes to the edge security products. They've gone way beyond that now these days, including a full array of other products like network switches, Wi-Fi access points, endpoint protection as well. But as part of a layered approach to security, we have found that there's nothing that we would want to change with the way we do business with Fortinet. They've been spectacular to work with. It was very impressive at that event that we were at their headquarters in Sunnyvale to go past that wall of patents.
Yeah.
These are engineering people that solve problems through some amazing technology that they create and patent. And it's not just a company that's picking up bits and pieces and putting them all together and calling it a product. They engineer it from the ground up, and they really do a heck of a job.
Yeah, they do. And Bob, appreciate your contribution in that focus group in mid-December, because to your point, they've got the engineering thing down, and they're open and receptive to working with the partner community. It's not as strong of area of expertise for them, and I just appreciate them reaching out to our community and asking for help. But thank you, Bob. Folks, we have some results on the poll. So it was, do you offer security services? And we have 74% yes and 26% no. So we're having the right conversation today. And I believe, Mike, I'm going to turn the screen back over to you. Hang on, my friend. And I think you have it. Mike, go ahead and wiggle for me, Mike. All right,
Okay,
folks, we're back.
Terry.
Mike, let's jump into the good stuff. Thank you very much.
I just want to say something about that poll. I think you're probably wrong based on my definition of security, which is protecting data against loss, theft, or unauthorized access. So when you don't think about yourself, or 26% of you don't think about yourself as security people, look at that definition, because I think you want to look in the mirror and realize you're a security person, because just backing up data and being able to restore it is a security service. And setting up a computer with endpoint protection and setting up a firewall is a security service. So I'm not going to harp on it. I'm just going to tell you, I think it's more the way you're looking at what you're doing, unless you're doing things that are not typical within our industry. But most VARs, whether you're doing break fix, managed services, whatever, you're doing something for a client that is protecting data, and that is by definition security. So
right on.
Now let's talk about, thanks, Eric. Let's talk about compliance, which has really been our silver bullet to success, and we've worked with a lot of managed service providers who have taken our training classes, who we've coached, who we've worked with in different ways, to build a business practice that is just so solid and so sticky with clients that you're no longer looked at as just a commodity. So I said security is basically protecting data. What's compliance? You may talk about different types of compliance requirements, HIPAA and some of the other ones, the financial services ones. If you're in Canada, there's a national compliance requirement called HIPAA. If you're in the United Kingdom or the European Union, or if you have clients that are working with any organizations in those countries, that there's a new requirement coming out called GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. So these are simply requirements that are set by others. Who are the others? Well, we always talk about the federal laws, but there are state laws too. The European Union and the United Kingdom have laws. There are industry regulations. We're going to get into more specifics about each of these. Contractual obligations, and we're seeing this more and more and more, where if an organization is going to work with you, they are telling you in a contract what you have to do to protect their data. And finally, insurance policy requirements. And more specifically, we're looking at things like cyber liability or data breach insurance. And many of you on the call have probably been asked by your clients to help them fill out the insurance application. So let's look at some of the different federal and state laws and regulations. So the NIST cybersecurity framework I've discussed in the context of both the CompTIA Security Trustmark and the New York State and Colorado Department of Financial Services regulations. I'm not going to go through all of these, but HIPAA is for healthcare, GLBA, FFIEC, SEC, FDIC, and NCUA have to do with financial organizations. FISMA is for federal agencies and the contractors that work with them. CIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act. I'm going to talk about that later when we talk about how to actually sell using compliance as a great selling tool. FERPA is for student information. E-rate is a funding program through the federal government. DFARS is for organizations that work with the Department of Defense and the contractors. Plus we have state data breach laws, state agency requirements, and even professional licensing. And if you don't think about that too much, but if a lawyer loses their data and they lose client information, that's actually not just a data breach that may be reportable under a state data breach law. They have to report that to the Bar Association because they violated the confidentiality requirement, the ethical requirement that's tied to their license. So I've told professionals before when we've been talking to them about cybersecurity services that it's not about just getting caught by a federal agency. I said, if I'm your client and you lose my data and it becomes public, or if you don't know where it is, I'm going to go to the Bar Association and file an ethical grievance against you. All of a sudden they pay attention because the last thing they want is their professional licensing board crawling up their you-know-what, investigating them to see if they could have used better cybersecurity practices to protect their clients. That could actually affect their license. Industry requirements. Everybody knows about PCI that protects credit card information. But remember that the I in PCI stands for industry. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI-DSS. ISO, the International Standards Organization, has cybersecurity certifications in the 27000 series, and ISO is an industry certification. It's not a government law, but it's something that an organization can decide to do voluntarily. I've mentioned the Bar Association ethics rules. CompTIA Security Trustmark is our industry's requirement for security that's voluntary. And then you have certifications, and the certifications could be individual certifications, such as the CompTIA certs and the CISSPs and other ones. But don't forget that the vendors, for example, Fortinet, have certifications for people who go to school and learn how to properly set up a firewall. So these are industry requirements, and where they may be an actual requirement as opposed to being optional is that the vendor may have a program that said that if you want to qualify for our silver or gold program, which may get you better pricing or more NFR product or whatever their programs are within their organization, that you have to have a certain number of people that are trained in their product. So these are all industry level requirements. But who else? We're seeing that cyber liability and data breach insurance companies, when you fill out the application, it asks you things about your cybersecurity. I'm going to warn you, you can't take those casually. There's a lawsuit going on in California right now where a cyber liability insurance company is suing its clients to get $4 million back that was paid in a settlement. And this was a healthcare organization that had lost the data, and they were sued by their patients, and the settlement was $4 million. Their insurance paid it, and now the insurance company's going back and saying, we reviewed your application, and you said you did things on your application. Now, I don't know what their application said, but we see them regularly where it asks if all passwords are changed, and if you have a firewall with intrusion prevention, and you have endpoint protection software running on all of your computers. And everybody just loves to answer yes, yes, yes. But what happened in this case was that after the breach and after the $4 million settlement, the insurance company went back and checked the network and found that those things that were said on the application had not been consistently implemented. So now they're trying to get $4 million back. Think about yourself and what liability you may incur by just telling someone, you know, yeah, answer those questions, yes to everything. You really want to go in and check that network. It's another opportunity for you to make more money and prove your worth to your clients. We've just had a healthcare client that came to us for a HIPAA project, and the driving force was not HIPAA. It was their insurance company had turned down their application for cyber liability insurance, which means that if they had $1 million breach, they weren't calling an insurance company. They were going to write $1 million check. That's what drove them to us. Think about that. You can use that to get business. Finally, client and partner requirements. We have had law firms and other types of organizations that have gotten contracts from clients. And we see this, for example, when a big company is going to hire a law firm. They'll put in cybersecurity requirements right down to the type of encryption that has to be used to protect the data. And when your clients are signing these, that's another ka-ching for you to be able to go in and prove your worth, because now it's not just the value, the general value of the services that you're offering, and those are good things to protect data. If your client's getting $1 million from one of these companies that require cybersecurity controls in their contract, all of a sudden your services are worth $1 million to them. States have data breach laws. 48 states, and everyone asks which ones don't. Alabama and South Dakota are the only two that don't, plus Washington, D.C., U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, and Puerto Rico have data breach laws that protect Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, and bank and credit card information if it has the access code to get into the computer, to get into the account. Look at Social Security numbers. Every single business in the United States has Social Security numbers because they have to pay their people. They also have Social Security numbers for contractors. So we often find those not in the HR department, but in the accounts payable department because they're paying contractors. That means that every single business in 48 states, plus DC, the Virgin Islands, Guam, and Puerto Rico, every single business has to protect data, or else they have a reportable breach if they lose it. This is a huge opportunity. The other thing is that when you look at the other laws that they have to comply with, for example, a healthcare organization in, say, California, not only does the healthcare organization have to comply with HIPAA, it also has to comply with all of California's laws. These all stack on top of each other, and the states will go after organizations in other states to protect their residents. So twice now, the Massachusetts Attorney General has gone outside of Massachusetts to to penalize organizations that lost data on Massachusetts residents. So these are huge issues that you have to deal with. Don't forget, you have Social Security numbers that you protect, but also it's a huge opportunity when you go to a business and they tell you they don't have to comply with any laws. Unless you're in Alabama and South Dakota, show them your state data breach law. They all have to comply with that. 13 of the states protect medical records beyond what HIPAA does. And those states have reduced HIPAA's 60-day notification period. So we see companies out there all the time that are offering services either to healthcare organizations directly or even through MSPs. And they say, we're going to take care of all your HIPAA compliance and we're going to help you comply with HIPAA. And we've gone into some of the end users that have bought those services and seen that the incident reporting process is a 60-day process because that's what HIPAA requires. However, we've had clients in California that have had those services, and California requires 15 days to notify patients. Florida and Texas are 30 days. So you can't just say, well, we have to comply with HIPAA because we're a healthcare organization. You have to look at what state the healthcare organization's in to see what the reporting rules are of that state. The more you can learn about this stuff, the more business you can get by showing the clients that you're knowledgeable. PCI. So it's the payment card industry regulations, and I think many of you are familiar with this, that apply to every organization that takes credit cards. And there are different levels within PCI. I don't have enough time to go through all the different levels. If you're doing 1 million transactions, you have to do more for security than if you're only doing 1,000 transactions. And if you are storing all 16 characters of the card number plus the expiration date and the security code and all that, you have to meet a higher standard. But even smaller merchants, these level 3 and 4 merchants, have to fill out the questionnaires, have their network scanned, and even at the small level, the lowest level of an organization that takes a credit card, there are some requirements. And again, you can prove the value of your managed services to a client, not just by, again, these are good things you should be doing, but if they have a lot of business that comes in on credit cards and you can protect them against data breaches and make sure they stay in compliance with PCI, that you're going to be much more valuable to that business. If they don't comply with PCI, there are different levels of penalties, but one of them could be is they could lose their ability to take credit cards. So let's look at HIPAA for a minute. What are the opportunities here? So HIPAA has a couple of different definitions of organizations that are covered. One is covered entities, and that's not a generic term like lowercase c, lowercase e. An official HIPAA covered entity is an organization that bills or pays for healthcare services. So doctors, dentists, hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, and pharmacies, they're billing for healthcare services, and then the health plans and even the self-insured companies that pay for healthcare services are HIPAA-covered entities. HIPAA also talks about business associates. Now, these are companies like yours and mine where we are offering services to healthcare organizations or to other businesses that offer services to healthcare organizations. So there are roughly 2 to 3 million. There's no way to know for sure how many business associates there are, but they would include healthcare organization lawyers. So for example, a doctor that represents a doctor, a lawyer that represents a doctor or a hospital in a malpractice suit is a HIPAA business associate. An accountant that does audits of doctors' offices or hospitals is a business associate. Plus IT vendors like you are business associates. Electronic health record software vendors. Data centers and cloud services. And last year there was specific guidance put out about cloud services and why they have to comply with HIPAA even if they don't have direct access to the data that's being stored there. Paper shredding companies, copier repair, billings and collections companies. Look at all these different organizations as opportunities for you to sell to. So 700,000 healthcare organizations and then 2 to 3 million business associates. Why does it cover you? It covers you because if you have even one client that's a HIPAA covered entity or a business associate, you either have access to their data itself or the systems that house that data. So what are the fundamentals of HIPAA? Some real basics here. The privacy rule came out way back in 2003. And this was the rule that told the medical practices that they had to protect medical records. They had to give you this document called a Notice of Privacy Practices. They had to sign business associate agreements with their vendors. And it says that it's okay to share the information with caregivers and business associates under certain controls, but they can't share it with others without specific authorization. So most of us are patients, and if we're at the doctor's office and we bring someone with us, the doctor may say, is it okay to speak in front of this person? But if that person called up later and said, hey, I want to get Mike's medical record, the answer should be, anyway, no, we can't tell you that because you're not on the list of authorized people to get Mike's medical record. So that's all in the privacy rule. It's the basic rule that started HIPAA. 2 years later, the security rule kicked in, and it talked all about things that had to be done to secure data. Now, there are two different kinds of laws. And when we were talking about the state data breach laws, those are reactive laws. That means that all they say to you is, this is what you do if you have a breach. However, the HIPAA security rule is a prescriptive law. It prescribes what you must do to protect data. So there are about 50 different sections. of the HIPAA security rule, and it talks all about things like how to manage passwords and encryption and all that, but it's very vague and it can be confusing. And this is why we've put together training classes on HIPAA, and we've coached MSPs on what they need to do in their companies to be able to protect themselves and also provide their services. So for example, we've been talking about the Fortinet firewalls. You will not see in HIPAA, in the HIPAA security rule, the word firewall. However, if you go and look at some of the enforcements, there have been enforcements against organizations that not only didn't have firewalls, they were more specific and said they didn't have firewalls that had active intrusion prevention running on them. So first of all, every doctor's office needs a firewall that has active intrusion prevention running to make sure that it's doing its job as a true firewall and blocking unauthorized activity. So why am I saying this? Is you just read the rule, you're not going to understand HIPAA. So you have to look at the enforcements of HIPAA as well to see how they translate that. And the way that they can force a firewall as a requirement is under a general category that says all data must be protected against malicious software. So the security rule is the rule that most MSPs live in. In 2009, we got a separate breach reporting rule that requires patients to be notified and the government to be notified if there's a breach. And then in 2013, there was a big game changer called the HIPAA Omnibus Final Rule, and that rule went back and changed the original privacy rules and the security rules. So HIPAA can be complicated, but
Mike?
It's worth learning. Yes, Harry?
Yeah, with the change of the slide, if you don't mind, folks, two econometric forecasts. The first one is with just a few minutes, 6 minutes until the markets close, we are not going to make up the 649-point drop in the Dow today. So I'm now forecasting that. But more importantly for this, Mike, I'm forecasting, folks, we're probably going to run about 15 minutes over. This is a fantastic topic. We have a large crowd. Just wanted to give you a heads up as we come up on the top of the hour. Love to have you stay through the whole presentation. I'm now predicting that this lecture will end about 1:45 Pacific. All good, but want to give you a heads up if you need to tap someone that you might be a few minutes late for your next phone call. Mike, please continue.
Okay, thanks, Harry. So we talked about the laws and things, but the basic question is what's protected? And what's protected is called protected health information. It's a great term, right? Tells you exactly what's protected. But very simply, it gets down to this. It's information that has to be identifiable to a person and then includes something to do with their treatment, diagnosis, or even payment for healthcare services. So just having a list of people's names on a sheet that's in a doctor's office, for example, a sign-in sheet when you go there, is not considered protected health information because it doesn't talk anything about their treatment or their diagnosis or their payment. So a sign-in list is okay, or even a name on a door in a hospital. But the minute you start combining that with the treatment information, all of a sudden now you have PHI. Now, ePHI is electronic protected health information, which is obviously in electronic form, but let's think about that for a minute. Words, images, and now in today's world, voice files, because voice files are all digital on any media. It could be a local device, it could be portable media like a thumb drive or even a CD or a DVD, or it could be up in the cloud. This is where most healthcare organizations think their patient information is, because they visualize this as all being in the electronic health record system or the official chart. But it's all over the place. It's on local devices, on cell phones, on laptops, on PCs at desks. It may be with a third party like an answering service that takes notes when a patient calls and then sends them over to the doctor's office. It could be on a copier because copiers have hard drives in it. Even that recorder that the doctor's talking into is nothing more than an electronic chip today that saves the information as data and may upload it automatically into a computer system. And then at the top, the cloud. Could be any sort of a cloud service, anything from the official electronic health record system being located in the cloud, or it could be some other cloud service that people are sharing the information on. All the cloud services have to be compliant with HIPAA. I get this question all the time from MSPs, and the question is this: am I responsible if my client screws up and doesn't comply with HIPAA? And the answer is not under HIPAA. You see the one-way sign there at the bottom. So look at where the patient is. Patient goes to the doctor, and the doctor says to the patient, besides the healthcare stuff, I'm giving you this notice of privacy practices, which shows how we're going to secure the data. The doctor's allowed to hire you as an MSP to help support their network and to help do their backups and maybe manage their data in a data center or whatever. So the doctor hires you as a business associate. Then you go and resell a cloud service or an online backup service, or you have servers, or you take their servers and put them in a data center. So now you bring in a third party into the process. The doctor's responsible for you. In other words, if you have a breach, the doctor is the one that has to notify the patient, and the doctor actually can get in trouble if it's investigated and determined that you were not a responsible partner. They should have found someone better. But you're responsible for yourself and your subcontractor. So if you're bringing an online backup service into the relationship, that's all okay as long as they comply with HIPAA and they have to sign a business associate agreement with you. But you're responsible if they have a breach. So pick any of the cloud services that you can think of. If there's a breach there, you have to notify your client, who is the doctor, and then the doctor would be the one that notifies the patients. So under HIPAA, you're not liable. One thing I'll warn you about, after I say again that I'm not an attorney, is that you have to be careful with your contracts and what you're telling your clients you're doing so that you haven't incurred non-HIPAA liability if something happens because you were supposed to do something and you didn't do it. Who's not a business associate? There's a category called conduits, and they would include the internet service providers that are just sending packets across the wire. And then also some incidental contact with PHI, like if an electric light fixture in a doctor's office started smoking and they called an electrician in, they turned it off, they called an electrician in, to come fix it. The electrician, just because he goes in a doctor's office, does not have to be considered a business associate. However, because you are coming in contact with the systems that protect data, you are a business associate. HIPAA audits. What's an audit? Just like an IRS audit or any other kind of audit, you're randomly selected to be audited for compliance with the regulations. So what they're doing is what they call desk audits. They don't come to your business, they don't send a team in. They ask you to respond to the audit demand with some documents, and the desk audits, because they sit at their desks and review them. You have 20 days, not business days, 20 days to respond. Your name, if you're a business associate, as an MSP, or we are also, we're subject to audit because one of our clients would have been selected for the audit pool, and one of the questions that they ask is, what is the contact information for all of your business associates? So they're doing random audits, not just of the covered entities, the healthcare providers and the health plans, but also business associates. If you're audited and you fail, your client could end up failing. But here's the worst part. And this is from an actual letter that one of our clients received last June. That was an audit letter, and it says, under the Freedom of Information Act, we may be required to release this letter and other information about this case upon request by the public. Well, don't think about the public so much as the media. And the reason I'm showing you this is that if you're not compliant with HIPAA and you fail an audit, and even though you may believe you're compliant with HIPAA, if you fail the audit, your name can be publicized as having failed the HIPAA audit. What is that going to do to the relationship that you have with your existing clients, and what's it going to be like trying to get business when people are Googling your company name and the headline shows up, this company failed the HIPAA audit? So I'm just showing you that you've got risk in this game that you need to protect. HIPAA is more than a risk analysis. People ask us all the time, can you do a risk analysis, or what's your price on a risk analysis? Well, you have to have one. A risk analysis to look at the data and what the risks are to the loss of the data, what the threats and vulnerabilities are. But these are some things from the government that clearly say that the HIPAA security rule is all about implementing risk management. And then to comply with HIPAA, you must continue to review, correct, or modify and update security protections. Why am I showing you this? Because everybody asks you for a risk analysis, but these are this slide right here shows you why they need managed services. And the government's not going to advertise for you, but you could take this wording and say to comply with HIPAA, you must continue to review, correct, or modify and update security protections. And by the way, we have these great managed services that help you do that. Penalties have increased. So from 2014 to 2015, there were $14 million in HIPAA penalties. 2016 to 2017, we're up to $42 million for that 2-year period. And in 2018 already, there have been $3.5 million from the federal government. When it comes to security and compliance, you have to look at this from the standpoint that you're going to get audited or investigated. What I mean by that is you can talk all day about the great security products and solutions you're selling, but when you're audited, the auditors or the investigators or the lawyers suing you or the lawyer defending you are going to ask you for these things. We want to see your policies, your security policies, to see what you say you're going to do. What are the rules for your organization as they relate to cybersecurity? Procedures are all written. Every one of these things has to do with written documents. Procedures say, how are you going to do it? And then evidence. Show us some proof that you're doing it. So let's take something as simple as endpoint protection software. You have a policy that says we're going to protect our devices against malicious software, period. That's your policy. Your procedure is we are going to use, and now fill in the blank, whether it's Symantec or McAfee or ESET or Trend Micro or WebRoot or whatever brand of endpoint protection you're using, that's your procedure that supports the policy, that shows how you're going to comply with the policy. And then what's evidence? Evidence would be some sort of a report, for example, that showed all the computers on the network and verified that the software was installed, turned on, and has current definitions. So when it comes to security and compliance, look at this three-legged stool. The main characteristic of a three-legged stool is that it can't stand if it's missing one of its legs. So you can't have a validated or auditable security and compliance program unless you have written documentation, policies, procedures, and evidence. And there are probably some people on this call that will nod their heads when I say technicians and engineers hate writing documentation. They don't like putting a lot of detail in their tickets. They don't like writing down procedures. They typically aren't the people that are going to write the policies. That's usually somebody on the business side of a business, but on the technical side of a business, they don't like to do documentation. So even if procedures were written at some point in time, they're probably not current now. And then is there really any evidence that shows you're complying with your own policies and procedures? So what are your next steps as you're running your business? First thing is to identify your compliance requirements. If you have to comply with HIPAA, then that's one of them. If you have clients that are in financial services, you may have banking regulations that you have to comply with. Get your company compliant. And the reason I say fast is that you've got risk. Create a toolkit, market compliance as a service, and deliver compliance and compliance services. Compliance services means you're doing things the right way. Compliance services means that you are helping your clients comply, and then enjoy your money. The reason I say get started fast is right now, as we speak, if you've got healthcare clients, you could get an audit letter tomorrow. And my real question for you is, are you ready for that? So when you're running your business and you're just looking ahead at all these great things you're going to do, think about the regulators that are driving that tractor trailer behind you. You need to stay in front of them.
And there we go. And Mike, on that fifth point, I'm glad you didn't say offer complicit services, because we don't want any collusion or conspiracy, but that's for another day. Hey, Jenny, if you can bring up the poll question, and while people are answering the poll, I want to make a Super Bowl prediction if I can. So let's start with the poll. We're having a conversation next with our underwriter, Cenex. Cenex is a well-known distributor in the industry. and their story is in front of you. It looks like the poll's open. So folks, bear with me. I'm doing this on live radio, but I think it's going to work. So let's get a Super Bowl prediction. Alexa, who's going to win the Super Bowl?
The team favored to win is the Patriots. That was tough to get out. But I'm flying with the Eagles on this one because of their relentless defense and the momentum they've been riding off their underdog status. E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles.
And there you have it. So, Mike, were you able to hear that okay? I'm trying the old-timey noisemakers in a radio studio.
I could, Harry.
All righty. Boy, that's fun. Took that right out of Brother Who Art Thou with that old-timey radio station that they go to. So with that said, I now know how to show videos. Then we're going to have a quick Synnex conversation. And again, it's because of the underwriting capabilities. Jenny, if we could go ahead and close out the poll. And it looks like the result, let's see. Do you currently have a Microsoft Cloud practice? 62% yes, 32% no, 5% I'm not sure. So there we go. Let's bring up the Synnex video, and then we'll have a conversation with Synnex. Thank you, folks, for supporting our community. There we go. Ryan Ball.
I'm not sure if Ryan's on the call. This is Brent Ayers, though, from Synnex.
Oh, Brent. Forgive me. Well, you know what? We're just strangers that are now friends. How about that, friend? Sir, give it your best shot. What's up with Synnex in 2018? We have some changes. The CSP program is a known entity. We have Microsoft 365. What are a couple of Synnex takeaways? And again, thank you for your community support.
Yeah, we're happy to support the community. We love supporting this organization and group, and happy to be a sponsor. But Synnex has got big things planned for 2018. So as you guys know, we are a distributor of Microsoft products, but we do more than just Microsoft. We have a number of cloud vendors and hardware vendors, etc. But where I focus my day-to-day is on our CSP business, whether that's Office 365, our other cloud vendors, or Microsoft Azure. Azure is kind of Microsoft's big push for 2018, and
yes,
so
sir.
that's kind of our big push for 2018. So we're doing a lot of cool stuff around Azure. We've really kind of put our money where our mouth is. When I started at Synnex about 2.5 years ago, we had one Azure guy, so to speak. And he's still with us, but now we've grown to 4 technical resources and 4 sales resources as well. So we got sales engineers, we've got pre-sales solutions architects. So we've really put our money where our mouth is. So we've got these guys ready to help price out any sort of Azure configurations. We'd love to see some traction on our IoT business. We're doing a lot of cool things around IoT for this year, incorporated with Azure.
Yeah. Well, you know, Brent, here's what I'm thinking, my friend, is that we're going to enjoy your company the next few weeks. And again, we appreciate the long-term support of Synnex to keep us on the air. Let's hit those head on, because we have some Azure conversations coming up in the next couple of lectures. And then, you know, I, like everybody else, has a natural curiosity of IoT. So I'm more than serious, but if you want to make a note on that, let's hit those head on the next couple of visits, because that's you might even be a little bit ahead of the curve in the SMB space on some of the Azure and IoT conversations. But as everybody on this call knows, I mean, that's how we got to where we're at, right? We're MSPs. We better be ahead of the curve. And there we go. But Ryan, and we're going to get this in the thank you note, but just for giggles, how could people reach you? How could people find out more from Cenex? And we will get this in the thank you email going out tomorrow.
Okay, certainly. A best way to get in touch with us is by just reach out to me personally, and I can filter things as they come. I can be kind of the one-stop shop, and my contact information is brenta@cenex.com. So it's brenta@cenex.com. Yep. So I can field those and source them as necessary. If it's not me, I'll figure out who the right person is. But yeah, we're growing rapidly here, and Azure's a big push for us this year. So I'd love to talk to you guys about Azure, or even if you're brand new to the cloud, we can talk about Office 365 and some of the easier ways to move to the cloud as well. We are here for any and everything. Basic, medium, hard, give it to us all.
Yep, and forgive me for confusing your name, sir. It's been an extremely long week. In fact, I'm going to end on this note, is that folks, do not look at MarketWatch or CNBC till later when you have an adult beverage in your hand. Not a great day in the financial markets.
No.
But, sir, thank you very much. Thank you, Brent, for your time. And with that said, Mike Semel, if you want to grab the talking stick again, we're going into round 3, and we're got a lot of interested people listening to us.
We're winding down, Harry, and just to thank Cenex again. They've got a great management team there. My friends Peter Larock, Kevin Marai, Steve Jow, Bob Stegner, Kirk Nesbitt, really a strong management team, and they are so channel focused. They love everybody that's in our channel. So let's start winding down here. So data is worth more than gold. I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to show you some things here and also wrap up on how you can close sales using compliance. So first, let's talk about gold. What are the characteristics of gold? Well, we all know it's high value, it's precious, it's something people want, and it's something people want to steal. And if you look at all of those things, it means that gold is something for which you invest in protecting. If you had 10 bars of gold, unless you're Harry that lives out on an island that nobody can get to, you're going to have it in a safe or you're going to have it in a bank vault because gold has a high value. When you look at data, data has a high value, and it's interesting because I recently saw that data was actually being listed as an asset of a company for a loan request. That data was being used as collateral for a financial loan. There's nothing more that can tell you that that has value. It's precious. It's something people want. We all know that data is something people want to steal. And I'll tell you, it just surprises me when these small organizations say, oh, there's nobody that wants to steal my data. They're absolutely wrong because they have data on clients or on employees like Social Security numbers that have a value for identity theft. But just ask every one of them, what would happen if your biggest competitor had access to all of your data? For example, if you're in a competitive bid situation and your competitor knew what you were going to bid, or if you're in a real estate transaction, if your competitor in the transaction knew what you were going to offer, and things like that. It doesn't matter how big you are, you have data. There's some data in your system that could end up probably bringing your business down. So bottom line is, just like gold, the data is something for which you invest in protecting. In this case, you offer the tools, the products and the services to protect the data. So here's a healthcare example that absolutely positively proves that data is worth more than gold. And these were a couple of thumb drives that were lost. So what is the value of a thumb drive if it was solid gold? I looked up that a thumb drive is 3/4 of 1 ounce. Gold, unless Harry's going to bring us real bad news, is running around $1,200 per ounce. So if a thumb drive was solid gold, it'd be worth about $900. A medical practice in Massachusetts paid a $150,000 fine when it lost a thumb drive containing records. A health plan paid $2.2 million when it lost a thumb drive. Again, that thumb drive would have been worth $900 if it was solid gold, but it was $2.2 million in a penalty because it was lost. That proves that the data is worth $150,000 to $2 million using these real-life examples. Let's talk about the value
Hey,
of
Mike,
security.
gold
Yes.
closed at 1334, down 1360 today. Slight drop in gold.
Okay,
Please
but it was higher than the number I used, which means that it'd be worth more than 900 because I was using a $1,200 figure.
There you go,
an
my
ounce.
friend. There you go.
Okay, so let's go back to that comment I made earlier, the definition of security being a business problem with a technical solution. So how do you tie what you're selling to the client's business needs? In other words, you've got a security solution, great, the best one ever, the best firewall ever, the best endpoint protection ever, and I'm just going to say to you, so what? You tell the client you've got the best firewall and they say, so what? What does it mean to them? Well, it's going to protect your network against intrusions. They don't know that they're not getting intrusions. They don't know that their network's being scanned 1,000 times a day by automated systems trying to break into it. They don't feel the pain. You don't know you have a stomach until it hurts. Their stomach doesn't hurt. So how do you talk about the value of security? You have to put it in the context of their business. Eric, can you advance the slide?
Oh, sorry. Oops. I think you got it back, my
Okay.
friend.
Okay, thanks. So I took a class years ago from Franklin Covey called Helping Clients Succeed, and the best thing I ever learned, and if there's any wisdom you take out of this today, besides just knowledge about HIPAA and other things, this is wisdom. Your solution has no value. It only has a price until your client defines the value of their problem. Your solution has no value, just a price, until your client defines the value of their problem. So if you say to them, we've looked at your network, we looked at all the equipment you have, and we're $2,000 a month for managed services, that's a price. They don't know that it's worth $2,000 a month until they realize, or they can tell you and tell themselves that their problem is worth more than $2,000 a month. So you have to come up with the value of their problem. So here's a school district example. And this school district is a rural school district that qualified for money through the federal E-rate funding program. I'm not going to get into all the details about that funding program, but this is a rural school district where $1 million was really a ton of money. It really helped them grow their network and secure it and do things they couldn't do when they were just trying to use tax dollars. So they had applied for the E-rate funding, and they got $1 million in E-rate funding from the government. However, there was a catch. In order to keep their E-rate funding, they had to be compliant with the Children's Internet Protection Act. I mentioned that earlier in one of the alphabet soup discussions about federal requirements. So they had to comply with CIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act. CIPA compliance required about $50,000 in firewalls, and the firewalls weren't budgeted. But that wasn't the biggest problem. So here's what a firewall looks like, right? So you look at this, and you recognize the firewall, and you look at the specs, and we're all IT guys. We can go down through here and know what an IPsec VPN tunnel means, and SSL VPN users, and the number of FORTA tokens, and all this stuff. So we'd be able to go sell this firewall, right? I don't think so.
Oh my, that's a scary Friday
Because
photo.
this is a picture of the school board. How do you go and sell this to them? Now, just how do you get on a school board? You're elected. How do you get elected? You get people to vote for you. So there was a hairdresser on the school board who told me she told all of her lady clients to vote for her and get their husbands to do it. Let me tell you guys, we all are nodding our heads on this one. If your wife comes home and says, my hairdresser's running for school board and you're going to vote for her, you're going to vote for her. There's no downside risk. It's not like saying I want to go shopping instead of the Super Bowl where you're going to argue. So this was the challenge. We had people that were not educated, not technical. They were great people. They were looking out for their community. They were very dedicated to the students and everything. So here was my presentation to the school board meeting, at the school board meeting. I said, do you remember how hard everyone worked to get the $1 million in E-rate funding? And they all nodded their heads. And I said, to protect your $1 million in E-rate funding, the good news is you only need to spend $50,000 on firewalls. And they made an immediate motion to buy $50,000 on firewalls. You know what one of them asked me after the meeting? What's a firewall?
There you
What
go.
I'm telling
I
you
love it.
that compliance closes deals faster than talking about the features and benefits of the product. I'm not going to go back to the firewall picture, but you know what the specs are, and you know what all the great things that Fortinet says about their firewalls and other brands if you're selling something else. But they didn't care. They didn't know what they were buying. They didn't care about the brand. They didn't care about the throughput. They didn't care about the VPN tunnels. They didn't care about intrusion prevention. All they cared about was that they could lose $1 million in E-rate funding if they didn't comply with HIPAA. So in order to comply with HIPAA, the good news is you can keep your $1 million if you only spend $50,000, and that's how they bought firewalls. So that's it for the presentation. We're going to come back in a couple minutes and tell you how you can get a free copy of my book as well as another special offer.
Well, and I think, Mike, if I'm correct, we've got a bunch of questions built up, so we're going to take the questions in the lightning round, as it were. So, folks, thanks for hanging in there. We are running a couple minutes over today. I would offer in a kind way, by design. This is an important topic. So, we have SureWeb and Simon, longtime supporter of the SMB Nation community. Simon, first of all, thank you for your ongoing support, and I think we want to talk about your academic lecture series, your online conference. Would you like to talk about that today? It's the most timely.
Yeah, sure. I'll make that quick. Don't hurry. Pleasure to be here, Harry, as always, and pleasure to support. So I just wanted to give a heads up to everyone listening. Obviously, you guys are like education, like to stay aware ahead of the curve. And we've built a conference for partners back in November, but obviously it was in Toronto, and some people flew in, but it's always tough to make some time and be there in person. But we wanted to hire a crew, and we a video crew to make sure we record everything and be able to pass on that great educational content, because we invited a lot of high-profile speakers that some of them we paid a pretty big amount of money to make sure that we have very valuable content. It wasn't just we had some product sessions, but it was a lot about very thought leadership content. Just an example, the session that I preferred myself and that we got a lot of great feedback was from Peter Jensen, which is actually an Olympic athlete, performing a coach. So this guy is a doctor in psychology, and he's all about getting the most out of the people. And partners that were in the room really got inspired and really got some great feedback about how they're going to come back to their business and motivate their team members to accomplish more and be more performing. And it was really inspirational. And we recorded all of that. We made that into a great online, we call it interactive sessions. We didn't just want to give you on-demand videos to start with. So we took the best 5 sessions to start with to make sure that we have dates and there's a chat and people can interact during these sessions, although it's recorded from back in November.
Yep.
So yeah, we wanted to invite everyone to make sure you join and you participate and exchange with other peers. So you can visit accelerate.sureweb.com and go take a look, register, and you're going to find some very valuable content. There's some speakers around marketing, around security. Actually, we had CompTIA talking about security trends for 2018. So a lot of valuable content, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it as much as all the great feedback we got from the partners back in Toronto.
Absolutely, Simon. Let me put a wrapper around that, folks. You can also click through, if you go to smbnation.com, the top banner and the side banner are advertisements for the Accelerate conference. And you know, the more the merrier. I mean, this is the time of year where we invest in ourselves, and oh boy, I mean, I can just go on and on and on about education. And I like your example of the speaker, Simon, because with sports psychology, sports medicine, there are analogies there. But also, folks, I don't know if you realize, but we're 1 week out. February 9th is the opening ceremonies for the Winter Olympics. So, you know, just as soon as we get done with the Super Bowl, we're headed into the Olympics. So I think we have a, Simon, before you go, Ginny, if you could bring up the poll. I believe we have a poll. My notes reflect we have a poll. And Simon, where might people see SureWeb at an industry event? Do you, by chance, have an example of 1 or 2 shows coming up this winter, spring where someone might be able to bump into you?
Yeah, definitely. We're going to ASCII it's in February, 21st of February. It's in California. I'm trying to remember the city.
Okay, no problem.
I don't remember, but yeah.
ASCII group? Very cool.
Group back in next February 20th. And we're going to be in Dallas the week after. We're pretty involved with IMCP, also International Association of. So we've started a partnership with them. We're going to be in most of 20 cities around the U.S. We have like 3 or 4 shows with ASCII. We have a couple of shows with Channel Pro Network. So a lot of shows are scheduled, and it's going to be a busy year. Yeah.
You're everywhere. Okay, thank you, Simon. So the question is, which of the following resources would be most useful in helping you resell cloud solutions successfully? Boy, I could go on about polling and why this is a great question, but we're tight on time. I'm going to read the results. 26% are ready-to-use marketing campaigns, 63% sales and technical training, and 11% accessible expertise like direct support services. So bottom line, 63% sales and technical training. Hey, guess what, Simon? That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here, and that's what we're doing with your conference series. So
yeah, exactly.
We're right on. Hey, Mike, you want to grab the talking stick and the mouse back?
Yeah, I'm not seeing the slideshow version of that.
Yeah, hold on. Let me take you back. Fair enough, my friend. Let's see. Mike, how we doing? Is that doing better?
Yep, thanks.
All right, and folks, we're going to overtime. Thanks for hanging with us, Mike. Let's do some slides. Let's do some questions, my friend.
Yeah, that's why I'm here, because I want to answer whatever questions. And if we do run out of time, then I'll make you an offer, Harry. Take the questions, send them to me in a document. I'll send you the questions with the answers, and then you can share them with everybody that was on the call, or post them on your website.
Yeah, fair enough. And Mike, and along those same lines, folks, we're having a conversation with Mike about getting him back for spring quarter. So your questions, your participation are critical for us to understand how Mike could visit us a second time. Mike, I vote for a slide or 2 on GDPR. Not going to go into it today, but it affects us all in May. Give it your best shot, Mike. Let's jump into the good stuff. Here we go. Outrun a truck.
Harry, since you opened the can of worms, I'll tell you one thing about GDPR now, which is that the United Kingdom has already said that if there's a breach now that's not discovered until after May, they're going to come back and penalize organizations for having a breach today that wasn't discovered until May. In other words, GDPR is essentially already kicked in. It's a different discussion.
It is.
So, I talked about earlier, folks, and thank you for staying, and I am going to answer your questions. How do you outrun that truck? Because there are so many regulations, and particularly HIPAA, because it affects so many people. MSPs have told us, oh, you know, I only have 3 doctor's offices, so I really don't think I need to do much for HIPAA. No, those 3 doctor's offices, if they were in the audit pool, have already given your name to the federal government. And if they spin the wheel, you're going to get an audit letter tomorrow. So how do you outrun the truck? One of the things we've done is we've put together a training program, and it's a full system called HIPAA and Profit about implementing HIPAA compliance just for MSPs. We've seen all sorts of HIPAA training. We've seen organizations that offer HIPAA products and services and cloud services and training for healthcare organizations, and they tell MSPs, oh, use our system for your business. It doesn't work because you're an MSP and these are products designed for doctor's offices. I was an MSP. I was the chief operating officer for a cloud service. We know what you do and we know what you need to do to comply with HIPAA and then how to monetize it. So our HIPAA and Profit system includes training, but it includes a toolkit that has business associate agreements, personalized policies, 130 pages of security policies for your business, checklists, templates, all sorts of things that you can implement tomorrow. We include guidance. That means anytime you have a HIPAA question or any compliance question for that matter, send us an email. We will help you answer your questions. And then we have our effective proposals and profit system, which is a template for writing a proposal. And remember the school board and how I knew what their problem was? I understood what their need was, so I was able to turn that into a proposal and a sale that met their needs. Our proposal template includes a section called Our Understanding of Your Needs. And basically, you're telling the client what you understand their business problem to mean so you can show them your technical solution. Bottom line, that's a $999 solution that we sell. However, what I'm going to provide to you is, in addition to that, I'm going to throw in our Data is Worth More Than Gold sales toolkit. That includes an actual bar of gold. It's about 6 inches long. It's a bank, but it looks just like a bar of gold. It says Data is Worth More Than Gold on the side. And this is something that we have used successfully and MSPs all around the country are using to walk into a client's office, or if they're giving a speech at a Rotary Club or a BNI event or a Chamber of Commerce event, they're holding up the bar of gold. We want the clients and the prospects to visualize that their data has value. So if you order before February 16th, which is 2 weeks from now, 11:59 p.m., you'll get the entire package plus the Data is Worth More Than Gold kit, which by itself is worth about $1,500 for only $999. I told you that I was going to give you a copy of my book. So if you simply text the word Harry, Harry, to 844-335-3635, you'll get a link to fill out an order form so we know where to send your book. And you'll get both a free printed copy and a digital copy that you can read on your iPad or your Kindle or your phone. So Harry, if you don't mind, leave this up, or Jenny, leave this slide up while we go through the questions so people have the keyword to send in, the word Harry, Harry, to 844-335-3635. And now I'd love to answer whatever questions have come in. And thank you all for your time, but we have to go now.
All right. So Jenny, I believe you volunteered today. It's all wackadoo. Can you handle the questions today, Jenny? I appreciate it.
Sure. Our first question is, might we be able to get a copy of the contract you use to minimize your liability?
I'll give you some of the terms that we put in there, but I've been told by my attorney I shouldn't just share my contract with someone. Let me just warn you about something, because I've seen MSPs do this, and maybe I was guilty of this years ago when I was starting in the business. Don't take somebody else's contract and just use it. So I'll send you the liability clauses out of our contract and to you, Jenny, and let you distribute them or post them or whatever you want to do.
Perfect. Another question, will the slides be available for download? We are recording the webinar, and I'll be sure to send out the webinar recording within 48 hours, but is there a place for people to be able to download the slides?
Sure. I mean, I can make a link available, so I'd be glad to do that.
Fantastic. We have someone asking, can we revisit the next step slide? I think it was the one before the Synex presentation.
Yeah, do I still have control?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And there we go. And Jenny, any particular question, or just leave that up and please proceed to the next question?
Yeah, I think we'll just leave it up for a second. There wasn't necessarily a question. They just asked to revisit that. So we got another
Fair
question.
enough.
Regarding selling compliance, it seems you almost have to be an attorney to know what all the compliance requirements are. And if you provide support in multiple industries, the regs you need to know grow exponentially. Are there checklists available anywhere as to what is needed to meet each requirement to make this process easier?
Well, let me go back, because I don't agree with the concept that you have to be an attorney. I'm not an attorney. I was a managed service provider. Actually, we probably didn't call ourselves that back in 2003, but I was a VAR, and I went to a conference and I learned about some of this and said, you know, how does this apply to my clients? I honestly don't think you need to be an attorney, and it took me 15 years to get to where I am now in the compliance business, and we work in all sorts of compliance areas, financial services as well as healthcare and everything. And I'll tell you that the training class that we put together cut out all of the stuff that I had to fight through to figure out what I needed to know as an MSP to be able to comply with HIPAA, which I felt was my biggest opportunity and my biggest threat. I've never seen a particular checklist that says, you know, here's what you do for this compliance requirement or anything. But I'll tell you one thing. I really think the answer to the question is simpler. If you learn HIPAA, for example, inside and out, you can comply with anything. And the reason for it is that you will understand how a compliance framework works and what you have to do to help, for example, a healthcare organization comply. If you walked into a bank tomorrow and you looked at their regulations, you're going to see so many similarities with only a couple of things different that you will be essentially a compliance expert in a bank within a day or two if you truly understand HIPAA. I can tell you that because when I left being the CIO in a hospital and I became the CIO in a school district, I had to switch from complying with HIPAA to FERPA, which protects student information, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. And all I did was I applied the HIPAA security rule to a school district because FERPA doesn't tell you what to do. So I think, you know, maybe the answer is to use Google or something to look for some of the specific requirements, and in some cases the NIST framework. That's the other thing. If you become familiar with the NIST cybersecurity framework, the NIST CSF, or if you want to get the CompTIA security Trustmark, which means you'll have done it for your business, same answer as before. You're going to learn these things and you're going to be able to apply them to other industries.
Mike, I think you meant to say Bing. We're in the Seattle area, so Jenny, if we could edit out Google and put in Bing. But I'm being a little facetious. I'm being a little facetious. But Jenny, before the next question, I have looked up another Super Bowl prediction from Bing Predicts. Bing predicts, an analytics site, New England. New England favored to win by 63%, not 63 points, but a 6-point spread, 63% favored to win. Jenny, next question, please.
Yep, we have a comment. Checklists are not sufficient for HIPAA compliance. And other than that, I don't have any current questions that have come in.
Well, that's fine. That is actually a compliment to the speaker. Let me tell you, when you have too many clarification questions, Mike, that often means that I look at like writing. If I can't write what I'm trying to say and you have questions after reading what I wrote, I'm not a good writer. I mean, I didn't reach my goal with the audience. So, folks, I'm going to leave you with, speaking of which, those that attended my recent analytics lecture in MSP Tech Talk just a couple hours ago back at smbnation.com, where you can see the SureWeb Accelerate banner ads to join their complimentary conference in the month of February. Go down to column 2 under analytics, and this morning I posted up about a 500-word piece on machine learning is animal learning. Machine learning is animal learning, and it features the SMB Nation mascot Astro, the English Springer Spaniel, is a study that I conducted. Mike, I'll be the first to admit it wasn't peer-reviewed and it wasn't, the best academic study, a study nonetheless. With that said, Mike, why don't you go back to your your last slide, slide that has some basic mic information, and give it your best shot. Take us out, as they say.
And Mike, one more really quick. People would like to know,
Sure.
How do we order Mike's product offering? So how do they order that offering that was on, not this slide, but the last slide?
Yeah, no, fair question. Mike, go back to that slide, the offer slide. There you go, folks. And that's a fine one to end at. And we'll get all this in the thank you. But Mike, once again, for our own edification, maybe quickly repeat what the offer is. We'll get this in the thank you note. And thank you, Mike.
Well, and thank you, Harry and Jenny. So the offer is a full system for HIPAA compliance, HIPAA and profit, because it also talks about how to monetize it. It includes a toolkit that has templates and checklists and personalized policies for your company that you can implement to be compliant with HIPAA, and all sorts of information on how to deliver compliance services and monetize it, along with training on HIPAA and the compliance framework. We also include our effective proposals and profit training class that includes a template that you can use for your proposals. Everything's $9.99. If you order the book, we will follow up with the information on how to order this, and I'll also send Harry and Jenny the link that they can share with you so that you can get more information about this and be able to place an order.
All right, Mike, and go to the last slide, please, because this is something people can do immediately, is type Harry to 844-335-3635. While we're doing a wrap, we will be back next Wednesday at the standard time of 12 noon Pacific GMT -8 for the next MSP Tech Talk winter quarter. We are in the design for spring quarter. I'm at Harry B at smbnation.com. We're going to have an MSP, for example, an MSP who specializes in Bitcoin mining and cryptocurrency, and that's kind of cool. So it's one of us doing something else. We're going to have that topic along with some others, and then also be thinking about if you want to nominate topics for summer quarter. Summer quarter tends to be a little bit more relaxed. Mike, when I was in college, I loved summer quarter because there was a great thing called grade inflation. So I probably got a higher GPA than I deserved, but I arbitraged summer for winter quarter so I could ski. Now you know what I know. With that said, Jenny, thanks for your help in the control room. Mike, thanks as always. We'll get you back next quarter. Folks, have a great day and a great Super Bowl weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.